what I like to do, and if I think about the difference perhaps between my work and some other people's work, is that if you're drawing or painting on a small scale, what happens between your eyes and your mind and your hand is a completely different movement. You're just using your wrist, which is great. But if you can use your whole arm to paint, you can transmit so much energy and excitement, and you can make the thing live. And I would say it's perhaps the difference between playing the piano or an accordion or whatever it might be, and a church organ.
Yeah.
And one is one kind of shape and relationship with the instrument or the paints or whatever it might be. And the other is a whole body, with an organ. You're moving your legs, you're moving your whole body. And I think that's what I love doing in painting, which is just to make it a completely physical and sensual experience.
Do you feel sometimes that you're battling your pictures to get them the way you want them?
Yes, because...
That's an interesting idea.
Because, you've been doing it for so long, and you've worked out all these strategies, and the strategies don't work. They worked some time ago, but in the present you're thinking, oh, it doesn't work anymore. What do I do? So you try something else. It may be a bigger mark, it may be a smaller mark, it might be a different brush, because you get kind of fond of certain brushes.
Yeah.
And you've got to say, no, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go for something else. And it changes the marks you make, and it takes you by surprise. And it's that element, I think, that makes you keep on doing it. It's surprising yourself. If you can surprise yourself as somebody who creates things, whatever it is you're creating, then you're going to surprise somebody else. And that's surely the important thing, to surprise people, to get them to just stop a minute and look.
Because there's so much energy in your pictures.
That's what I would hope.
Is that actually part of the overall aim? Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I just want to capture that energy. Sometimes you get restricted, and it's good to be restricted, because then you've always got that balance between the freedom and then the restraint. So if you draw, whether it's life drawing or architectural drawing, you're continuing that discipline, but it frees you up to have the confidence and the delight. It's a sheer joy painting, even though it does give you huge dilemmas, and you're making thousands of decisions all the time as you paint.
Do you really enjoy it?
Yes, I do.
There was a pause.
I do love it, but it is also very, very challenging, because of course you can never get it right. It's always a process, it's always an adventure. And when I finished a morning's painting or whatever it might be, I can't really think about anything else. I just go over and over what I've done and what I could do next. Sometimes you come back to a painting and it's great, it's done things that you didn't expect it to do, and it's off on its own trajectory. Other times you come back and you think, oh, that's completely overworked, I've done that to death, I've just got to leave it and move on. So it's complex, it's not a complete... Well, it's not like a hobby that you enjoy in that sense, because you really are trying to push the boundaries back all the time. And that can be exhausting, disappointing, but it can also be exhilarating.
Yeah. Do you sometimes find it frustrating then?
Yes, very frustrating, because but then there's energy in that, in that frustration there's an energy which actually pushes you on.
And in turn probably makes it more rewarding.
Yes, it does. It does. But being a painter is quite a lonely business, and having an opportunity like this to be able to share that, share what you actually produce, is exposing, because you're opening up your heart to other people. You want them to say things, you want them to react, and you look for that dialogue. but it is quite difficult as well, because it is a personal thing. But it's fantastic having this opportunity to be able to share and see what people think.
I want to create things which are beautiful. That's what I want. I don't want to create things which are antagonistic. I don't want to create things which are aggressive. I want to create beautiful things, to add something in the world. And I do find paint on canvas beautiful. I find oil paint a marvellous medium, and it's been going on for 500 years or so, and so to look at a Rembrandt and to see how Rembrandt mixed up a creamy white and put it on that bit of board or that bit of linen is marvellous to see that is something that I do is connected to something that's 500 or 600 years old. So I'm always looking back, and I think an artist should look back so that they can move forward. If you want a rule in life, it is don't go back.
Keep moving forward. Woody Allen makes a joke in one of his films that a shark dies the moment it stops moving forward.
Well, it does.
I don't know if
No, that's a point. That is a fact. Fish have to move forward, otherwise they can't get the water through their gills. They can't get the oxygen. So yeah, Woody Allen's just making a point on something that's actually a natural fact.
I notice your pictures have moved forward a lot. That's very different to what you're doing now.
Well, I would hope so, Miles. I would hope so. One of the things
I really like the old one. Yeah.
What I can't stand with fellow artists is people who've been painting the same thing or doing the same thing for the last 30 or 40 years. You should change. It should grow. It should alter. It should show that you're thinking rather than switching off. And that's what painting or any art is about. It is about moving forward. And if it's not, then why are you doing it? Because you should be trying to stretch yourself, just as you're trying to stretch the materials. You're trying to create something which stops people in their tracks and think, I didn't know that could be done. That's different.
If it's cold and wet and windy, you'll get some of the energy of the weather conditions into your painting, which is what happened with a lot of these drawings from the Romney Marsh and the escarpment, because it's so exposed that you want to get the feeling of that exposure and the history of wherever you're painting or drawing. You want to somehow absorb that and give that another life, a secondary life. And that's just absolutely wonderful. But it doesn't matter what the conditions are, the weather conditions, or for me, the light conditions, can alter and change as you're working, and you just absorb those changes and keep that moving on, which is absolutely wonderful.
There's 1,001 things you're considering.
Yes. You're thinking about whether you're uncomfortable, whether you're cold, if people are watching you. You're looking all the time, and that's what any of this is about. It is about looking. It is about seeing. And anybody who draws the distinction between what is practical and what is intellectual is barking up the wrong tree completely, because all those 1,000 decisions that you're making as you draw and as you paint, even if you destroy them along the way and nobody ever sees those because they're under the paint or they're under the pencil or the charcoal, I know they're there, and that's what builds the picture, builds the meaning.
Most music is abstract, and painting has only caught up with that in the last 100 or so years. So when you're painting and you're not using figurative elements, you've got certain basics that you want to get in, and one of the basics with me is the surface of the painting, the physicality of the painting. I don't like paintings that can't show that there's been activity there, and the more activity the better. Because again, it comes down to human activity, and a painting should be a record of my activity. So I want the surface to reflect what I've done, and then of course there's there's the issue of colour, there's the issue of tone, and there is an English tradition of tone, not a French tradition or Mediterranean tradition, because that's colour, but we've got tone, we've got light and dark. So I always look at whether there is a balance of light and dark or a deliberate imbalance. And I try to create that, and then the colour is kind of third in that sequence, because I look at colour in terms of tone, I look at colour in terms of light and dark, and then a balance again. So it's this whole business of balance or imbalance, and you're always looking at maybe just throwing things slightly off kilter and building it up and working it until things have moved to a certain point. So sometimes paintings take you by surprise that you've been working on them and you leave it, you think, I can't be bothered with that anymore. And you come down the next day and you look at it and you think, it's finished. I didn't realise it was finished, because you can't see it. When you're working in front of something, on and on, you can't be objective. And so you have to get away from it. And I put all the paintings up around me because you sometimes see them best when you're passing, when you're not looking straight at them. You see things out the corner. Yes, you see things in a different way. So you have to have what you've done around you so that you can see it in that different way, because very often you struggle with a painting and it's a battle, and you're not going to win that battle if you keep on taking it frontally.
Growing up by the sea, you've got a ready-made resource on the beach. You take something like this, a piece of chalk, and it's solid and it's ordinary, but things have burrowed into it, lived in it, died in it, and the sea has washed into it and created the holes and the shapes and the colours. See, there's a line going through there, which is a beautiful colour all the way through. And you could just spend hours looking at it, drawing it, painting from it. It's just all there. And any of these things that you find on the beach, if you just draw, if you just contemplate them, you've got absolutely marvellous shapes, wonderful life in these things, even though they've dried out. There is still so much life in them, strange, bizarre, surreal objects, which make lovely sounds as well. So it doesn't matter where you look, you'll find inspiration. There's a carapace of a crab, very, very strong, but ever so delicate as well. And after a storm, after high tide and heavy sea, you walk along the beach and there's this whole world there, not just organic, you can find bits of metal that have done extraordinary things, and bits of debris. But then painters have always been like that. Painters have always scavenged from all kinds of ready-mades, really.
Do you think it's important to keep looking at things and do?
Yeah, it's absolutely essential, because if you don't feed that particular way of thinking, then you could become repetitive. And there's a case for saying that there's nothing wrong with repetition, because you're just constantly making the statement over and over again, and that builds a style. But if it becomes too constrained, and if you become too tight within that style, then you run the risk of not feeding your imagination, and that's what you've got to do. You've just got to feed your imagination and keep it alive.
Long after you're gone, it exists. Producing things, making things, is habitual. And when something's habitual, you do the same thing again and again. So you have to try and make yourself react to that. And so a simple thing can be like throwing a couple of colours together that you never have done before, or you can't remember having done before, because the older you get, the less you remember. So you surprise yourself with colours, and then that surprise can go into the painting, and it can dominate a painting, so you have to be careful about that, because when you've surprised yourself, you want to keep on surprising yourself, and then it becomes the same again, so you have to trip yourself up, go back to basics, and rethink. But it's always that kind of conversation between yourself and the canvas, and the marks you're making, and seeing if it's doing something different. And if it is, you're getting somewhere. I think that it's a marvellous thing to be able to produce something which you've created and which will last. You don't know how it's going to last, but people are, people treasure these things. Having taught for a number of years, you know that when children, students, pupils have produced a drawing or a painting, their parents treasure it. And they don't treasure very many other things that they've done at school. They don't treasure their maths book. They don't treasure an exercise book of anything. But drawings and paintings or things that they've made, they treasure. And so you are producing something which will last.
In many ways, it's all in the start. The marks you make at the beginning provide you with the composition.
Yeah.
If you choose to overturn that composition, then you're doing something very radical and you're setting up a conflict on the canvas or the piece of paper or the manuscript or whatever it might be. Now, in setting up that conflict, you are creating a huge dynamic, and your painting can benefit from that and grow from that. At other times, as I say, the composition can be there right from the outset, and what you have to do is emphasise, push parts back, bring other parts forward, and just make sure that you are expressing that original composition in the best way possible.
People do not destroy paintings. They don't destroy drawings. There is something in our makeup which I think makes us respect the artifacts that we create, and I like to think that they will go on in whatever guise for a number of years and continue to just provoke people into thinking something, maybe anything to do with the painting itself, but they might just go on and have an effect. A rectangle in a rectangle is like an echo, and you're constructing something which, again, I'm constructing something which is like an echo, and it's trying to reduce things to their basics, building blocks, and creating images which are basic, but by producing them again and again in variations, producing something that's complicated. So creating something which is intricate from something which is very simple. So it's a kind of deconstructing something which is very complicated. You can't get anything much more visually complicated than a Gothic French cathedral. They are extremely intricate, but they're made up from basic stones. They are created from blocks. So I've had it in the idea of just deconstructing something which is complicated, bringing it down to something which is simple, a square, a rectangle, and then creating something from it which is extremely complicated in terms of the mesh of marks, and then thinking about what that final image is. I get so much enjoyment from going to galleries, to looking at paintings, and I would be proud to be a part of that lineage, that if somebody saw in my painting a visual link to another artist, another painting, that would be a real boost, that people can pick up those connections.
Almost like being accepted into that.
Yes, just into that pantheon of painters.
That canon of work.
Yes, in some respects.
I think some paintings are quite hefty and deep, and they've got a sort of profound energy to them. Something that comes from a very deep well, if you like. And other images, they dance and they sing. And yes, I would just want that movement to be expressed and transmitted to other people, so that they go away thinking that perhaps, they just looked through another window on something. And essentially it's about enjoyment and looking at different ways of expression. I don't know. I would say that it's wonderful to have the opportunity of talking about your work, because perhaps you can say something about the process and the depth of that. But it's also lovely just to be able to have it on the walls in a marvellous environment like this one, and see it afresh.
So if people coming into the Linden Hall can just see those connections, sometimes the problem is they're obscure connections, because you pick up on things which aren't in the mainstream, and you work on them and you bring them forward, and so that connection isn't that overt. But I'd just like people to think that maybe there is something going on which is a bit different and which is a bit fresh, and that would be my aim.